After launching the attack, the old man grabbed the sword's hilt with one hand, began to sheath it and started staring intently at Jiang and Zio Ban. One of the men standing behind him was the vice commander, Yang Guang. With a calm look, he informed him that all 300 geniuses were present. He asked him to please prepare to go up on stage and lead the opening ceremony. The old man sheathed his sword and began walking towards the stage. The people who were present in the camp started conversing among themselves. Some had heard that there were many Tianjiao camps in the Jiangnan area, but none had ever had a king-level figure in charge. For them, this was terrifying, as even standing dozens of meters back, the king of the celestial sword could kill them with a single move. One of them explained to the others that this was very strange since they had said that the old master was living in seclusion. He didn't know why he was coming out now. Some of them just heard the instructors talking privately that it seemed like the old master was going to take the initiative to ask for this. They didn't know if he wanted to recruit a disciple. If this were the case, then they should do well. Although some knew well that people like them should stop dreaming about it, because if he really were recruiting, then he would only recruit the best. Tang Ying started to stare at the old man and couldn't help but be shocked to see that the old celestial had come. Bai Feng, who was standing next to her, began to look at the old man with a surprised gaze and couldn't help but feel excited as he had finally met the living legend in person. Zio Ban started to look at the old man with a determined gaze and decided to defeat Jiang Wushuang once the camp began in order to leave a good impression on the old master. Wushuang cracked his fingers and couldn't help but feel excited since he had thought they wouldn't be able to invite the old man. He decided to make him his master. Mu Hankyu clenched her fists tightly, brought them close to her face, and couldn't help but be left open-mouthed and astonished at the same time. Jiang started pointing at the old man with his finger and with a confused look asked Luo Sandao if they recognized that powerful old master. She got very excited, approached Jiang, clenched her fists, and with a joyful look responded yes. She had been hearing about his legends since she was young. She began to recall the old man's incredible feats. One day a powerful red dragon appeared, but the old man jumped on its head and using all his strength drove the sword into its skull, causing it to open its mouth and start screaming in pain. She explained to Jiang that the old man was not an awakener but could suppress a group of 7th transfer seal kings and become number 1 under the Zhen Empire. His skills were even comparable to those of an 8th transfer from the Zhen Empire. Once he had killed a dragon with a single blow. Mu Hankyu put her hand under her chin, closed her eyes and began to think. She explained to them that although both were at the level of a Seal King, the senior Celestial Leaf King was the most respected existence by her grandfather. Her grandfather once asked her to become his disciple, but he rejected her. At first she was very frustrated, but then heard that many descendants of the Zhen Empire and Invincibles had also been rejected. Jiang started looking at the old man and with a confused look asked them if they were sure it was very difficult to become his disciple. Mu Hankyu approached Jiang and with a sincere look asked him if he was joking. As far as she knew, Jiang Wushuang and Bai Feng had been rejected by the sword god before. Jiang had seen Jiang Wushuang and the rest of their abilities. It was unimaginable how difficult it was to become a disciple of the old man. Upon hearing this, Jiang began to look at her with a shocked expression and started to wonder if it was really that difficult to become the old man's disciple. Luo Sandao approached them. She began pointing towards the sky with her finger, and with a serious look explained to them that they might not know it, but the old master had only accepted 2 disciples in his entire life, and that had been more than 20 years ago. Jiang began to recall how the old man had been hugging the tree like a lunatic. He also remembered how when he was putting away the sword he had asked him if he was willing to learn from him. Jiang closed his eyes and began to question whether the strange old man who climbed trees was the king of the celestial sword that everyone was really talking about. According to him, they did not seem like the same person. While a drop of sweat was falling from his cheek, with a forced smile he responded that now he understood everything. The old man got on stage and coughed to get everyone's attention. With a serious look, he introduced himself as Gu Kaishan, the chief instructor of Tianjiao camp. He put both hands on the table and reminded everyone that, as they all already knew, the Tianjiao camp in their Jiangnan area had been performing below average in recent years because the fights here were just a farce. If one did not dare to give it their all here, in a real battlefield with real dangers, they would only end up dead and without burial. He revealed to everyone that there were more and more monsters in this world. He grabbed the microphone tightly and with a smile told them that they needed more capable geniuses. Therefore, to better showcase and unleash their geniuses' abilities and make a better selection, this year he had established a new rule for the Tianjiao camp in the Jiangnan area. He called this rule death quota. Upon hearing this, Yang Guang, who was standing behind him, couldn't help but be shocked. With a look full of fear, he interrupted Gu Kaishan and tried to stop him. But he put his hand in front of him, indicating that he should not speak anymore, and with a smile explained to everyone that here he was the one who had the last word. Therefore, if something happened, he was going to take all the responsibility. Yang Guang started sweating like crazy, and with a confused look began to wonder what death rate Gu Kaishan was talking about. His superiors had not mentioned this before, and there hadn't been one before in the history of Tianjiao camps. There were many powerful geniuses down there, so he didn't know if this was going to create chaos. Gu Kaishan took the microphone, brought it close to his mouth, and with a serious look told them that today 10 of them were going to die for him in each round of the test. He also added that if anyone wanted to withdraw, they could do so now. Many of the participants panicked. A boy started looking at his friend with a look full of fear and explained to him that although this was terrible, he couldn't withdraw because otherwise his whole family would be shamed. His friend swallowed hard and with a trembling voice told him that he didn't want to die. Wu Shuang, who was standing in front of them with crossed arms, remained calm, began to smile, and thought that this was expected from the senior Celestial Blade King. According to him, the Tianjiao camp and Jiangnan area should have done this years ago. Zio Ban turned his head back, started staring at Jiang, and with a smile came to the conclusion that this rule had been made especially for him. When the camp starts later, he was going to be able to fulfill 2 of the old master's quota. Jiang started looking at Zio Ban and began wondering what this guy was plotting. With a calm look, he concluded that with this quota, even if the conflict escalated later and he killed Zio Ban, Uncle Jai Gang and the others wouldn't have to worry too much. Several minutes passed and no one withdrew. Seeing this, Gu Kaishan, who was holding the microphone in one hand, put his other hand on his waist and couldn't help but start smiling, since according to him it seemed like everyone had some pride. Behind him stood the 4 vice commanders. He extended his hand to one side and with a shout, announced that the entrance evaluation to the camp had officially begun. There were 300 people in the first round. Half of them were going to be eliminated. He grabbed the hilt of his sword, and while unsheathing it, with a serious look he explained to them that within the camp, 150 advancement flags had been randomly hidden. He also added that he didn't care what methods they used to get the flags. The round was going to end at dawn on the second day, and those who had the flags would advance to the next round. He unsheathed his sword, began pointing its blade at them, and while his eyes were shining, asked them to fight confidently and kill confidently. They could fight alone or form alliances. They were even allowed to destroy the entire camp if they wished. In short, he wanted to see their bloodlust. After saying this, he raised the sword to the sky and gave everyone the order to disperse as the test had begun. Upon hearing his order, everyone started running backward. Some knew that with their current skills, the best method was to find flags, hide, and avoid ruthless people. According to them, this was the safest way to advance to the next round. While everyone was running, Zio Ban began to smile. As his body was surrounded by a powerful blue energy, he unsheathed his sword, extended it to one side, and started walking towards Jiang. While little by little he was getting closer, Jiang, who was standing next to Mu Hankyu and Luo Sandao, remained silent. Jiang extended his hands to the sides, started staring at Zio Ban, and gave them the order to look for nearby advance flags since he was going to take care of him. Mu Hankyu did not know what Jiang was thinking. With a panicked look she asked him if he was sure. Just before she could finish the sentence, he extended his hand to one side, adopted a defensive pose, and told her that this was an order. Upon hearing this, Mu Hankyu and Luo Sandao turned their backs on him and started running. While Zio Ban's body was surrounded by powerful blue mana, he began to laugh and mocked him by asking if a rookie like him who hadn't even made a second transfer wanted to be a hero. Jiang extended his hand to one side, causing it to start releasing the poisonous mist of Little Nine. Although Zio Ban's sword energy was truly astonishing, it was much inferior compared to Zio Yuanwu's. Even though he was now much stronger than before, he didn't know if it would be possible for him to deal with Zio Ban using only poison without exposing the existence of the mother insect. With a calm look, he asked him to stop talking nonsense. Zio Ban listened and decided not to waste more words on a dead corpse. Using all his strength, he launched a powerful slash towards Jiang. While Jiang's body was surrounded by Little Nine's poisonous mist, he prepared himself for defense. But just before Zio Ban's attack could reach him, someone asked him to stop and threw some small knives at his attack, shattering it into pieces. This person was none other than Tang Ying. While she was holding knives in her hands, she began to stare at Zio Ban with an angry look. Zio Ban, who was holding the sword with one hand, began to look at her with a serious expression and asked what she was doing. When looking to the side, Jiang saw Tang Ying with a surprised look. He began to question whether she was the female assassin. Tang Ying put her hands on her hips, approached him, and shouted if he had forgotten their agreement with Bei Feng. They had agreed to kill Wu Shuang once the camp started, yet he constantly went off to deal with insignificant matters. She didn't know if he was using these excuses deliberately because he was actually afraid of Wu Shuang. Zio Ban clenched his fist tightly and with an angry look asked her who had said that he was afraid. Both turned their backs on Jiang and started walking towards the area where Wu Shuang was. Zio Ban, who was furious, asked her where he was. He decided to deal with him first since it wasn't too late to handle the trash afterward. Tang Ying began pointing in the direction where Wu Shuang was and explained that he had headed towards the forest and Bai Feng was chasing him now. Jiang deactivated Little Nine's poisonous mist, started looking at them and felt relieved since things had really taken a turn. He didn't know who Tang Ying was but felt that she was intentionally helping him. Once they moved away a bit, Tang Ying turned back, put her finger near her mouth and winked at him. Seeing this, he realized that she was indeed helping him. But he didn't know why since they didn't even know each other. She began to look down with a sad expression. She was the niece of Tang Jin. His aunt had asked her to secretly take care of Jiang Chen in the Tanjiao camp. But with her current abilities, she couldn't fight Zio Ban directly. She could only use Wu Shuang's name to try to delay his movements. A man with black hair who was carrying a bow on his back and holding several flags in his hands approached them, knelt before him, and explained that his father was the subordinate of his grandfather. These 3 advancement flags he had were a sign of his dedication to him. He was the 6th venerable transferred descendant named Huang Yongchao. Zio Ban approached him and with a serious look told him that he did not need the flags. He also added that if he really wanted to show his loyalty, then he could help him do something. Tang Ying crossed her arms and remained silent. Huang Yongchao, who was kneeling before him, explained that his subordinate would serve him with the utmost loyalty. Tang Ying began to look at Zio Ban and thought that this was not good since now Jiang would have to take care of this himself. But she hoped that Mu Hankyu and Luo Sandao could protect him. At the same time, Luo Sandao obtained 2 advancement flags. While she was holding them in her hand, she closed her eyes and with a joyful smile explained to Jiang that she had just found 2 flags. She arrived at the area where Jiang was and placed the flags on the table. Jiang, who had one hand resting on his waist, with a calm voice asked them both to take the flags first since he was going to another place to take a look. She rested both hands on it and told him that they were going to help him find it together, and Mu Hankyu, who was standing next to her, crossed her arms and remained silent. At that moment, someone shot an arrow, which began to move at great speed towards them. Jiang didn't take long to sense this. He put his hand under the table and asked them to be careful. Just before the arrow could get close, Jiang threw the table into the sky with all his strength, causing it to collide directly with the arrow. The attack was so powerful that the table was shattered into pieces. Luo Sandao started looking up and upon seeing this, she couldn't help but panic and start feeling scared as she didn't know what was happening. She quickly hid behind Jiang, placed both hands on his arm, and peeked out a little to see what was happening. He went on alert and with a serious look, shouted and asked who was attacking and if they wanted to steal their flags. Mu Hankyu drew the 2 daggers, held them in both hands, and adopted a defensive stance. The person who had launched the attack was none other than Huang Yongchao. He jumped, drew his bow, started aiming at Jiang, and while the arrow was surrounded by a powerful energy, he began to stare at him and revealed that he did not want the flag but wanted to take his life. He prepared to shoot the arrow towards Jiang, causing the arrow to start emitting even more energy. They looked up at the sky and upon seeing that it was Huang Yongchao, they revealed to Jiang that he had the hidden profession called Extreme Archer of the Sun Chaser. He was level 39 and his father was a venerable of 6th transfer. He was a subordinate of Zio from the Jiang Empire. Luo Sandao did not know if her Eternal Earth Shield would be able to stop the attack. With a penetrating gaze, Huang Yongchao launched the arrow towards them. It began advancing at great speed towards them. The blade grew larger and was covered in energy. As the arrow gradually approached, Jiang decided to do something about it. He asked both of them to step aside. He jumped, and while his eyes were shining, he began to advance towards the attack. He extended his hand, causing the palm to start releasing Little Nine's poisonous mist. With an angry look, he explained to them that he could tolerate everything else, but if they wanted to kill him, then they shouldn't blame him for being ruthless since after all someone had to fulfill the old master's death quota. Luo Sandao, who was behind Jiang, couldn't help but clutch her chest in fear, and Mu Hankyu, who was holding the two daggers, started looking at him with a surprised expression and couldn't help but begin wondering what he planned to do. Jiang launched Little Nine's poisonous mist towards Huang Yangchao, blocking the attack. The mist was so powerful that it not only blocked the attack but also shattered it, and began advancing towards him. While Huang Yangchao was flying in the air, the poisonous mist approached him. While holding the bow with one hand, he started looking around, and upon seeing poison, he couldn't help but panic since he had been told that Jiang was of the life type. With a look full of fear, he asked others not to hide and to come attack all together. Just before he could finish speaking, Little Nine's poisonous mist reached him and impacted his body, corroding and tearing him into pieces, causing him to start screaming in agony. The poisonous mist grew larger and the insects began to devour his body. His companions turned their backs on him and started to flee out of fear. They did not want to fight against a guy who had awakened the hidden poison class. Now that even long-range shooters like Huang Yangchao had not been able to deal with him, much less would those who had close combat classes be able to. They thought they were lucky since they escaped in time. Otherwise, they would have been cannon fodder. In a matter of seconds, the insects began to devour Huang Yangchao's body. Jiang, who was standing next to him, was controlling the swarm of insects. At the same time, in the observation room were Yang Guang and Gu Kaishan watching everything that was happening in the camp through some cameras. Gu Kaishan started to look at Jiang, and seeing how strong he was, he couldn't help but praise him upon noticing that he not only had the creation class, but also had the poison class. Yang Guang, who was standing behind him, was speechless. With a surprised look, he began to wonder how it was possible that Jiang had killed so quickly a second transformation prodigy. For him, Jiang Chen was incredible. He didn't know why Chuozheng City's night watch hadn't reported anything. While he was deep in his thoughts, Gu Kaishan turned his head towards him and with a serious look asked him to go inform the others and also bring some great masters of the spatial system since this was an emergency moment. They needed transfer at any time to prevent Jiang from killing too many people. Hearing his voice, Yang Guang snapped out of his trance and responded affirmatively, deciding to go inform immediately. He turned his back on him, started running, clenched his teeth tightly, and with a worried look decided to take advantage of the fact that the elder had not changed his mind to leave quickly, because if the prodigies really began a massacre, then the consequences would be unimaginable. Gu Kaishan put his hand under his chin, started observing Jiang and coughed to get Yang Guang's attention. Upon hearing his voice, he stopped running, turned around with a surprised look and asked if there was any problem. Deep down, he didn't know if this old man was regretting all of this. Gu Kaishan put his hand under his chin, started looking at the ceiling with a lost gaze, and asked him to bring 10 third-level ferocious beasts and release them separately. He also gave the order to place the advance flag on the ferocious beasts. Yang Guang turned around, gave a military salute, and with a confused look responded with an understood. He couldn't help but be somewhat impressed since the move the old man had just made was astonishing, because in this way, those demons could go first to fight for the advance flag and avoid harming others. At the same time, Tang Yin, Bai Feng, and Zio Ban surrounded Wu Shuang. The three drew their weapons and prepared to attack, while on the other side he crossed his arms. Bai Feng had been fighting against him for several minutes and was quite tired. He put his hand on his chest where he had the wound and began to pant heavily. Wu Shuang started looking at him and reminded them again that even if they joined forces, they wouldn't be able to defeat him. He didn't know if they really wanted to die. He mocked them by asking if they would feel proud after winning in a 1-against-3 fight. Zio Ban gripped the sword tightly, causing the blade to start emitting a powerful blue energy. He began to stare intently at him and explained that although it was dishonorable to win with superior numbers, he couldn't avoid fighting people who weren't boring. At that moment, the loudspeaker started to sound and notified everyone that Huang Yangchao had been eliminated by Jiang Chen. Upon hearing this, everyone was in shock as they couldn't believe Jiang had made the first kill. Unlike the others, Wu Shuang remained calm. With a worried look, Zio Ban thought that although Huang Yangchao had average strength, at least he was good and was in the second transformation. In this camp full of geniuses, he was among the top 50. He was much stronger than Zio Yuanwu and yet had been killed in the blink of an eye. Tang Ying, who was holding several knives with her fingers. With a terrified look, she thought that this was not good since her aunt had told her that Jiang was only level 26 of the creation class. She did not know how he, a person of level 26, could have instantly killed a person of level 39 from the combat class. Not even she, an assassin, could have killed Huang Yangchao so quickly. Bai Feng started looking towards the sky and with a smile came to the conclusion that this time the Tianjiao camp was full of hidden talents. Wu Shuang brought his hand to his face, started looking at them and with a smile asked if they were not going to face an expert like Jiang. They ignored him and prepared to attack again. But just before they could make a move, the camp notified everyone that 10 third-level fierce beasts were going to be released and each one was going to have an advancement flag. Everyone who possessed the advancement flag would get an additional score in the ranking. All those who were among the top 10 would receive a reward, with the first place reward being 100 million. Upon hearing this, Zio Ban and the others jumped and moved away from the area. Wu Shuang, who had his arms crossed, began to smile. Once everyone left, he stood still and thought that the King of Celestial Sword had given them new toys. He thought this was fine and decided to compete for and seize the blue flag. At the same time, Jiang started to look to one side and couldn't help but be surprised when he remembered that they had just entered the camp and the first place was already going to receive a reward of 100 million. For him, this prodigy camp was too generous. If he took first place and obtained the rewards and resources, the insects would be able to reproduce faster again. At that moment, something giant began to fall from the sky. Jiang, who wasn't far away, went on alert and started wondering what this was. A giant mutant beast in the shape of a wolf fell from the sky and landed near Jiang. Liu Sandao, who was next to him, explained that the first fierce beast had fallen beside them. Jiang began to look at the beast with a confused gaze and realized that this was a third-level beast. Mu Hankyu, who was nearby, panicked and asked everyone to be careful since the strength of this beast was equivalent to a level 90 awakened. Little by little, the beast started to stand up. Liu Sandao looked with some attention and she realized that it was in a state of paralysis. She asked him if they should take advantage of this situation. While little by little the beast was getting to its feet and regaining consciousness, Jiang began to advance towards it and prepared to attack, making his hands start to release the poisonous mist. He decided to take advantage of this and asked the others to move away. He prepared to attack, but at that moment someone launched a powerful slash towards him. However, he reacted in time, jumped and dodged the attack at the last second. He couldn't help but feel somewhat confused as he didn't know who had launched this attack. Several seconds later, he landed on the ground, clenched his fist tightly and began to wonder what was happening. The person who had launched the attack was Zio Ban. He was standing on top of the beast's head and holding the sword with one hand. He began to stare at Jiang and with a smile thought that not only had he killed Huang Yangchao in a second, but now he dared to steal the advance flag. Jiang extended his hand towards him, releasing Little Nine's poisonous mist, and asked him if he was going to fight then stop all this talk. Zio Ban jumped and used the technique called Heaven and Earth Wind Dragon Slash. He launched a powerful slash towards him which started destroying everything in its path. His attack collided with Jiang's, causing the poisonous mist to start disappearing. He positioned himself on top of the beast's head, and while his sword was surrounded by a powerful energy, he thought it was no wonder that Jiang was so arrogant since it turned out that he had the hidden poison type. It was said that the poison type was difficult to handle, but in front of his sword's wind, it amounted to nothing. Mu Hankyu clashed her fist with her palm, started looking at him and with a serious look thought that Jiang was in danger since the wind could face and defeat the poison type. She thought they should help him as soon as possible. Liu Sandao, who was next to her, started looking at her with a surprised look and explained to her that Jiang's poison wasn't an ordinary poison. If they went to help, all they would do is cause more problems. Jiang adopted an offensive stance and while his body was surrounded by poison, he began to stare intently at Zio Ban and decided it was time to end this. He used the technique called Poisonous Mist Dragon, causing a giant dragon made of poison to appear. It opened its mouth and prepared to attack. Seeing the size of the dragon, Zio Ban couldn't help but panic and think that this wasn't good. He decided not to stand idly by, grabbed the sword firmly, brought his fingers close to the blade of the sword and realizing that this poisonous mist was not going to disperse with a strike, decided to absorb it. The dragon opened its mouth and prepared to attack. He extended the sword towards the sky and used the technique Forbidden Spell, called Immortal Swordsman of Blue Lotus, causing a giant flower to appear behind him. The giant flower began to absorb the poison dragon. He asked him to watch how his sword's energy was going to consume all of his poisonous mist. While Jiang's eyes were shining, He started to smile and asked if he was serious. With his sword energy blocking the view, it was even easier to swallow. Little Nine manifested herself. She closed her eyes, opened her mouth, and began to consume the flower that Zio Ban had created. For her, this sword energy was very delicious. Thanks to this, Jiang gained 2,000 devouring value. He started looking at Little Nine and thought she was eating the whole flower. He reached out his hand towards the sky, and in the blink of an eye, the flower that Zio Ban had created broke into pieces, releasing poisonous mist. The poisonous mist attacked Zio Ban, causing his body to be thrown backward and crash into the ground. He opened his mouth and began to scream in pain. Jiang clenched both fists tightly, and now that Little Nine had consumed the energy of the flower, the poison dragon became even bigger and more terrifying. Zio Ban fell to the ground, grabbed the sword with one hand, and thought this was not possible. He did not know what kind of poison could annihilate a sword's energy. Jiang attacked him using the poison dragon, but just before the attack could impact against him, he hugged himself and used the life gem, causing a barrier to appear around his body. He took the sword, stood up, and seeing that his poison couldn't break through the life gem's shield, he thought Jiang was doomed to die. He started looking at him and thought that the Zio family really had second chances, but it was a pity because in this battlefield there were cameras everywhere, and he couldn't let the insects reveal their true form. He turned his head to one side where Lu Sandao was and with a calm look asked if she could create an opaque earth shield that covered the entire place. She clenched both fists tightly and told him that she would try. She extended her hands towards the sky, causing her energy to start advancing towards the sky. She used the technique called Earth Protection Shield cover. By doing this, a shield was created around the area. Zio Ban started to look towards the sky with a confused look and asked him what he was doing. Lu Sandao put both hands on her knees, lowered her head, and began to pant heavily as she had used a lot of energy to create the shield. While Jiang's hand was releasing the poisonous mist from Little Nine, he started looking at him and asked if he could guess how Zio Yuan. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.